For over a decade, the international community celebrated Ellen Johnson Sirleaf as the democratic savior of West Africa. With Harvard credentials and a steady hand, she became known globally as Africa's Iron Lady. That reputation was cemented in 2011 when she was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Western governments and development banks held her up as proof that neoliberal governance could stabilize a post-conflict nation. But to the survivors of the 14-year Liberian Civil War, a conflict that left 250,000 dead, this global narrative is a severe distortion. A Pan-African scholar and survivor known as Dr. Roots is stepping forward to challenge the official record. He argues Sirleaf calculated that the destruction of the Doe government was worth any price the Liberian people would pay. He positions her as a strategist who used her Harvard and World Bank connections to fund and facilitate the very warlords who erased whole villages. When the people who survived the burning of villages and the conscription of child soldiers see their alleged tormentor handed a Nobel laurel, it creates a massive fracture. The history written in Brussels and Washington directly contradicts the memory of the people who actually walked out of the fire. The foundation of this grievance relies on a specific sovereign document, the 2009 Liberian Truth and Reconciliation Commission Final Report. Produced by Liberians at immense personal risk, this report explicitly named Sirleaf among those responsible for initiating and financing the armed conflict. Its official recommendation was that she be barred from holding public office for 30 years. Rather than enforcing this finding, the international donor class and Western power brokers ignored it entirely. They permitted her to serve 2 terms as president without ever answering to a binding truth commission. This deliberate burial of the TRC findings transformed a regional grievance into a broader rejection of Western institutional authority. To the survivors, the silence of the powerful proved that the global order valued strategic optics over African testimony. The historical charges stretch back decades. Dr. Roots points to a 1985 speech in Philadelphia, where Sirleaf openly called for a revolution that would burn it down. From there, she allegedly used her World Bank networks and international prestige to launder the image of Charles Taylor's insurgency, facilitating an enterprise built on plunder and mass murder. To prove that Western leaders knew exactly what was happening, Dr. Roots compiled a second volume to his upcoming book. It contains an exhaustive archive of letters sent by survivors directly to American elites, pleading for accountability. Every single one of them ignored. The manifesto names names. It accuses liberal icons like Barack Obama and Oprah Winfrey of using their massive cultural platforms to legitimize Sirleaf's administration while deliberately overlooking the graves of hundreds of thousands of Liberians. The criticism applies equally across the aisle. Neoconservative figures are targeted, noting that George W. Bush awarded Sirleaf the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor the United States bestows. This unified cover-up prioritized strategic optics over the lives of murdered African civilians. To the survivors of Botuo and Dunzua Town, the award ceremonies and donor galas were an active endorsement of their suffering. That conclusion pushes the author's critique well past the borders of Liberia. The narrative frames Western intervention as an ongoing threat to African sovereignty entirely. He draws a direct comparison to Libya, arguing that the same ideological forces targeted Muammar Gaddafi because he attempted to establish a gold-backed currency that would break Western economic control over the continent. The ensuing NATO bombardment, authorized by the Obama administration, dismantled a highly prosperous state. The collapse produced open-air slave markets, where Black Africans were bought and sold in the ruins. If the international liberal order consistently leaves shattered nations and unanswered atrocities in its wake, the movement argues its moral authority is void. They assert that traditional, sovereign people must reject the system entirely and build their own. The first phase of this rejection is physical infrastructure. They are launching a campaign to fund a $10 billion memorial skyscraper in Liberia, designed to be the tallest building in Africa. This monument is intended to house the complete, unredacted history of the Republic. The goal is to force the testimony of the survivors into the skyline itself, making it impossible for foreign donors to ever bury the record again. The second phase is cultural. The movement dismisses Western institutions like the Oscars and the Grammys, viewing them as engines of moral decay that actively dismantle traditional family structures and faith. To replace them, they have established their own honor, the International Traditional Family Values Award, and they have chosen a highly polarizing figure for its inaugural recipient, Donald Trump. This movement aligns with Trump because they see a reflection of their own struggle. In his battles with the media and the administrative state, they recognize a fellow survivor of the globalist machinery that they believe ignored the Liberian TRC. This ideological alignment translates directly into policy. The movement is advancing a conservative covenant built around strict borders, mandatory work, and traditional gender roles. Their goal is to mobilize 2 million new Black voters for the Republican Party before the 2026 midterms. By securing decisive majorities in Congress, they intend to codify the America First agenda into statute. They want laws so durable that the globalist machinery cannot dismantle them. What started as a historical critique of a Nobel laureate is now an active mobilization effort. The upcoming book releases and funding galas are strategic gathering points to fund this political objective. When international institutions choose to bury the atrocities of a 14-year civil war to protect a preferred political narrative, that trauma ferments. Now, the forgotten survivors of Nimba County have returned to execute an organized electoral strike against the American establishment.